Hi, I'm Ian Whitaker, host of the JCDecaux Digital Changemakers podcast. The Digital Changemakers podcast showcases industry research and insights to inspire senior marketeers to push the boundaries on their marketing strategies and become change agents in their organization. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jeremy Cartwright, Consulting Director at Nielsen, and Jon Harman, Head of Data at JCDecaux UK, to discuss their latest collaborative research into how including location data in your measurement models can help you prove a better ROI for your marketing channels. Nielsen, the world's largest marketing mix modeling company, are global leaders in audience measurement, data and analytics. Partnering with JCDecaux, Jeremy led the Location Matters for MMM study, showing that including postcode-level data in marketing mix models provides more accurate measurement and an unprecedented view of what each channel is delivering in terms of sales. With over 10 years experience working with audience data at JCDecaux and partnering on this research, Jon joins Jeremy to share the significance of the findings for how marketeers measure campaigns. Welcome, Jeremy and Jon. So, thank you very much, Jon and Jeremy and Jon, whichever way you want. So it doesn't really matter. But maybe you could start off. Why don't we go in alphabetical order, Jeremy? Maybe tell us a bit about yourself, of your role at Nielsen and...
Perfect. Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm Jeremy Cartwright. I'm a consulting director in Nielsen's marketing mix modeling division. Now that means day to day, I'm helping businesses to optimize their marketing budgets and plan and activate better. And we're doing that by delivering strategic growth recommendations based on the models that we run to kind of control and quantify all of companies' business drivers, and then running measurable optimizations off the back of it so that we can deliver closed loop growth.
Okay, that's great. And Jon?
So I'm Jon Harman. So I'm the head of data at JCDecaux, and my role is looking at data across planning, optimization, and measurement of campaigns. So that's talking with the commercial team and also with clients to understand what their biggest challenges are.
Okay, that's great. And actually going to continue with Jon. Just come back on what you just said there in terms of clients and the measurement around out of home and the challenges that face. Can you just walk us through what some of those are? What's the feedback that you get when you go in and say outdoor is a great medium for you to advertise on? What are the pushback points you get?
That's a great question. So the main challenges we get from clients are around creativity and around measurement. So the big pushback that we get on measurement is very much around out of home not being measurable, or if it is measured, the results not coming back and saying that it's not working. So there's some real challenges that we've got around that measurement piece. And the big problem that we found with that is that people aren't necessarily measuring out of home in the correct way. And so the results that they're getting, which is suggesting sometimes out of home isn't potentially contributing as much as you'd expect, because of that challenge in terms of that measurement and not necessarily measuring it in the most effective way. And that's where we try and be consultative, work with them to understand how we can improve that.
Just as a follow-up point, would you say that in terms of that conversation, do you notice that's changed over the years? Do you think it's a constant theme that has come through? And
it is something that's been fairly consistent, especially around the area of econometrics. It's an area that out of home has always had a challenge with. Measurement itself has become a bigger and bigger topic for clients. So within measurement, there's always been a challenge, but measurement itself and everything being measurable has become more and more important for brands.
Okay. Jeremy, just from your side, you're obviously dealing with those brands over at Nielsen. What Jon has just said, how much does that resonate with you?
It resonates pretty strongly, to be honest. I think we live in an imperfect world, and that's true. Even more so for data measurement than most things. Over recent times, I think we've seen a pretty kind of consistent and growing trend of more and more marketers moving away from, for example, last click attribution as a single source of truth or the main way they're measuring the effect of their media, and that's driven partly by cookie deprecation and subsequent depreciation, but it's also driven by what, as Jon said, the need to make, or the desire to measure and account for every single pound in your marketing budget. CFOs need to know this, and pressure. Everyone has pressure on budgets. Households, companies are the same. That's really affecting kind of how marketing flexibility, I guess, in terms of what marketers can spend budgets on. And if we don't have a way to measure the effect of our offline media in particular, then that's an issue. And, then we're in, brand builders are going to be in trouble. So there's definitely a desire to make everything measurable in a more holistic way, which is, that's great news for us as marketing mix practitioners, because, we've kind of been banging that drum for some time. Also should be a positive for brand building exponents everywhere, because, that's how we justify the efforts that we're making and the kind of activations that Jon and his team are advocating for as well. But it does then open up other challenges in terms of getting the right data. So I think the biggest pain point, or the single biggest pain point we see and experience with our clients, is getting the right data across all the drivers that you need to control for to be able to isolate media, and having that data at the right level to make it granular enough and accurate enough in a way that we can make everything measurable and comparable. So it definitely resonates for sure. And I guess to Jon's point, those pain points historically have been even more acute for out of home, probably than other media channels. Just because of the nature of out of home. It's a tougher channel to measure for many reasons, which we can talk about as well.
Yeah, I mean, you say, it's an interesting point. As many people know, I worked as a financial analyst, sort of in the city for 20 plus years. And what was always, when went to meetings, people weren't interested necessarily in the output, what the model sort of produced. It was always the inputs and the assumptions. And it comes back to that point before about the quality of the data. Yeah, if the quality of data is not good in the beginning, whatever output you get out is always going to be tainted.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's, no one has perfect data. And that's it's always going to be, there's always going to be a need for compromise. But I think the important thing is to make the data, if there are ways in which we can improve the quality of the data that we're putting in, then, it's incumbent upon ourselves as kind of practitioners, and then our clients who are, custodians of that data to make sure that happens.
Yeah. And one of the other challenges that we've seen is around how campaigns are planned, because you can either plan a campaign for the most effective campaign, or you can plan a campaign to be as measurable as possible. But those two things, it's very difficult to get both of those in the same campaign. It's very difficult to talk to a brand and say, design a campaign so we can measure it, but it's not going to be as effective as it would have been if we planned it in a different way. So issues around for example, collinearity, so having two media channels always on at the same time means it's very difficult to pull those different media channels apart, and that's one of the challenges we've had. And I think we've talked, or you've talked previously about how out of home primes other media channels really well, and it does. But in terms of measurement, that causes the challenge, because if you've got those two channels at the same time, then you don't know which channel is doing what. You can only know the combined impact of the two.
Yeah, and I think I probably speak for modelers everywhere when I say that this has been a challenge for a long time with out of home data. That the challenge, especially around collinearity that Jon was talking about, part of that is often driven by the fact that many times the out of home data that we might receive from a client for modeling purposes might be, for example, monthly data, so aggregated across weeks, and then that's not great from a modeling standpoint because it reduces the variation, and then you can't pull, it makes it more difficult to pull apart different drivers. So that's why we're always pushing in when we're collecting data for more granularity, more variation in the data, which gives us a better opportunity to, to circumvent those kind of issues in modeling.
Okay. I mean, I want to come on to the location matters for MMM research that you've done. And obviously, when you look at, we'll talk through the findings sort of later. But John, from your standpoint, what was the genesis of that? Sort of how did it come about? And what was the principal aim of it?
So the project came about very much because of the sort of the conversation we're having here. So we knew that there was a problem with measurement with out of home, especially when it came to econometrics. There was some work done a couple of years ago which identified some of the issues with that, which were around the quality of the input data, around the granularity of the data, and also consistency of the data input as well. A lot of the models, when they were first built, were designed for big broadcast channels like TV. And they weren't really designed with geography in mind. So a lot of the models are at national level. And that's a real challenge for out of home because of the impact of out of home is very much is regional and often below regions as well. So relatively small granularity when it comes to geography. So the other thing that's developed over the last 5-10 years is the quality of data that exists for out of home. So in terms of who sees the frames, how many people see it, where they live, all that data is now available. It wasn't previously available. So the models were created at a time when the quality of data that was available for out of home was relatively low quality, and now it's very high quality. But some of those models haven't developed in order to allow that data to be used. So that's kind of where we came from. We know that there was better quality of data available. We knew it wasn't really being used. And the data that I'm talking about is, so it's joint industry currency data from Root. And that gives you an understanding of who sees the frame and then where they live. So if you're looking at the impact of the campaign, you can look directly around where the advertising location is, which is important for some categories. So impulse buys, for example. But for other categories, for example, I don't know, takeaway, delivery, something like that, where the purchase will be made will be tied to a home postal location. Where you see the out of home isn't likely to be in that same location. It's likely to be another point during the day. So that data is now available for us to be able to have a better impact, understanding of where we would expect the impact of the campaign to be seen. So we wanted to use that data in order to understand if we input that into the models, will we get a different result to if we use the kind of top line high level data, which currently is often used. And that's where we had a chat with Nielsen as measurement experts to try and understand from their point of view, is there something we can do around this?
And we're from our perspective, we're used to running kind of models with lots of geographical granularity in them. We run a lot of store level models for CPG, for example, and we're used to working at kind of region and postcode level. So it was a natural kind of fit to for us to take that data on and see what was possible.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, in terms of how you ran the project.
Yeah, so I get John kind of explained nicely about the root data and the fact that it gave us that ability to connect from the point of advertising, which is the data we normally receive at a very much higher level, to the actual point of response or purchase, which is probably more likely to be where the catchment audience is actually living. The other connecting data that we needed to essentially kind of quantify that connection was corresponding transactional data in the postcode. So we also had access to postcode level sales data from 3 big retail brands. And what that meant was that we actually used that as the KPI in our model. So we ran a postcode level model looking to understand the impact of that out of home advertising in the catchment areas where the purchase would be made. So we're able to match back those points and get a much clearer view of how the out-of-home advertising was really impacting in the postcodes where it should be impacting.
So Jeremy, for some of our listeners, they may not be too familiar with the term route data. So would you mind just giving a very sort of simple walkthrough of what that exactly is?
Sure. Well, I might defer to John as the industry expert on route, and he can do the walkthrough.
Sure, no problem. So route is how out-of-home measures how many people see each individual frame or poster location. The methodology is quite complicated, but it boils down to a few points. So there's a high quality GPS survey. So it's 20,000 respondents carry around a GPS device over a 2-week period. That data gets combined with where there's traffic counts, where there's pedestrian count data, and then that gets combined with some eye tracking research, which Lumen have done. And that looks at what proportion of the total people who go past a particular frame actually gone to look at it. So it's netting down that total gross volume of impressions down to a net volume of impressions, the number of people who actually see it. Now, as part of that methodology, Route also understands where the person lives, which means that you can look at the impressions in two ways. Either where the impressions are actually delivered, so the physical location of the screen or the billboard, or the home location of the respondent. So for a particular campaign, you can look at, either where the impression's delivered or where you'd expect potentially that impact to be for purchases which happen later on at a home location. It's been going for about 10 years and there's actually a revamp in the route methodology at the moment. So in the next couple of years, that will continue to develop. But it's a really crucial data set for us to understand, exactly who sees it. And it's the industry standard as well. So all the out-of-home companies and buyers and sellers come together to agree the methodology. And it's kind of the gold standard for understanding the total people who see frames.
Okay. Seems like a robustly designed piece of research. Tell us about the findings.
So I think there were kind of three big questions we wanted to answer. The first was about the statistical side of it. So do we see better model fits, for example, at a total level by including this data? Because I guess what our point of comparison was, we also ran, if you like, a control model where we used just standard national out-of-home data. So we were looking to see what the improvement was, but we also wanted to see how that played out at the variable level. So do we have a more predictive model that better matches the regional element? Because that's a key kind of missing piece of out-of-home. Now the interesting thing was that when we looked at the total model fits, we didn't see a significant change, which shock horror. There was they didn't move significantly, but if we remember that actually out-of-home was something like 8% of the media we were measuring, and the media itself was accounting for only about 8% of the total volume of these brands, it would actually have been more surprising if that had transformed the fits, because you're talking about less than 1% of the volume being affected. But what that does mean is that if people are using kind of substandard out-of-home data and just gauging whether it works by the total model results, they're going to be missing a trick, basically, because they're not going to be seeing that it's not actually working well to capture at the right level that it should be. And that was borne out when we looked at the more detailed kind of granular postcode fits, because trying to fit national data to that kind of at that kind of granularity was just not capturing the variation in the postcodes. So that meant that if we would have tried to use that national model result as a projection for future activities, we'd be kind of working with a flawed result. Basically.
Right. Okay.
And then obviously the other big kind of result we were looking for was what does it actually do to the impact of out-of-home? Do we pick up a stronger out-of-home impact? And that was pretty comprehensive. We saw, I think it was 42% higher ROI from out-of-home in the model where we were using the postcode information with route and capturing the activity at the right level. intuitively, that's what we would have expected to see, because we're literally looking for the response in the right place rather than the wrong place.
Yeah. And sort of from your standpoint, John, sort of for you, what were the main points that came out?
Yeah. So I think, as Jeremy said, that first result, while it might seem when we first looked at it, was a bit of a surprise, is almost the more important result for us, because what we really wanted to say is that if we model it in the way that we have been previously, it's not going to necessarily produce the right result for out of home. And we know that those models, as they are at the moment, will be going through these statistical tests to work out how accurate they are. And the fact that the national model still came out as an accurate representation as a model, it doesn't mean that all the constituent parts within that are going to be working in the way that they should be. And if you are looking at that to suggest how you should be investing your media budget in the future, then it's unfair to almost to be looking at the results and making decisions on individual media channels on them if each media channel isn't kind of being looked at under the same scrutiny of understanding the channel, understanding what the challenges are with MMM with each of those channels, and trying to build the most robust model as a result. We wanted to really start the conversation around this. This is in no way the finished article. We're saying that this is 42% is the increase we saw here, but me and Jeremy have had conversations, and it could have gone up, it could have gone down. The point we're trying to make is that without using that accurate geographic data, you're not getting the most accurate result you can. The other point that we want to say on this is that this isn't, we've talked a lot about out of home here, but it's not just about out of home. There's a lot of other media channels that have a locational element to them and would benefit from using this within the methodology. But it's really about understanding each media channel, understanding what the challenges are with how they're currently being measured, and potentially how can we improve that for the future.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the point about kind of the 42% being compelling, but not something that necessarily other companies can just, or brands can just say, oh, okay, that's good. I can apply a 42% factor to my substandard out-of-home data. It won't work like that. So it could be 62%, it could be 22%.
There's going to be variation between
these. That's the nature of kind of aggregation bias, is that you can't actually predict it. So I think that's a really important point that John made, is that it's great that we saw that kind of impact, and it justifies the hypothesis that we went in with. But it has an important implication for how behavior around, I guess, data measurement and how that's used in MMMs and other research should work ongoing.
Okay. Actually, that's a good point. Do you think that methodology sort of that you've approached it, do you think you will bring it across to other platforms?
I guess there's an inherent challenge in terms of a lot of models, and I'm talking about the industry now, not Nielsen specifically, but a lot of models will be run at national level. So I think there's going to be a kind of there's a challenge for some, I guess, vendors in terms of how they fit that data in. But I think that's where it's really important that the models that are being built for. And kind of measurement approaches that are being developed to kind of step into the vacuum almost of in a cookieless world are kind of built with this kind of granularity in mind. And that's something we really kind of try to prioritize in the work that we do.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would just say as well, I think it's understanding what data is out there. When we talk to MMM practitioners, they didn't necessarily know the root data was out there. We've also added some additional data, very similar, but looking at mobile data with a similar idea. So looking at the catchment of where we'd expect the impact for out of home to be, but using a slightly larger sample size. So just being I guess, having a conversation with the different media owners, the people who are experts in their fields, making sure that the data, there's more data than ever out there. So making sure that correct data is being used wherever possible.
Okay. So we've had the research, some great findings from there. Now, if you were to issue as it were, a call for action, what would those points be? What would you say needs to be done post this? It's great to have the research, but there needs to be some follow through off the back of it.
My kind of piece of advice to companies would be make sure you have a data measurement framework so that you have the right data in place and have a plan to measure all of your media, and not just different pockets of it, all of the media in a holistic way, in the context of your wider kind of business and business drivers. And I would say run MMM, and that's what we would position as the best approach to use, because it's really important that with the pressure on marketing budgets, that companies are able to justify exactly what each piece of media activation is bringing to the table. And we see so many examples of where companies have kind of set out on this path, don't have the data in place, and then we spend weeks or even months looking for the data or trying to piece together data that an outgoing agency took with them, and because no one had the foresight to kind of put it in place. So, get the right data, think about how good the data can be, and where, as to the point we've been making around out of home, get the best possible data for it to cover every activity that you've done at the best level of granularity, and work with a marketing mix practitioner who can cope and I guess incorporate that level of granularity into their modeling structure. And at Nielsen, we do this every day, and if anyone wants to get in touch, we'd be happy to explain to them in more detail how we're able to do that.
Okay, that's great. And John?
Yeah, so following on from the kind of the answer around data, it's really important to understand what data is available for which media channels, and to really make sure that the way you're measuring a campaign matches the way you're planning it and what your objectives were going in. And for out of home, come and talk to us at JCDecaux. We are really happy to kind of take a consultative approach and to understand how you're trying to measure out of home at the moment, and to kind of give the advice of the many years of experience that we've had in terms of trying to measure out of home, which however you measure out of home has always been a challenge. And we've had a lot of experience trying to address some of those challenges. So come and have a conversation with ourselves, but really try and understand all the different media channels in the way in which they work, and maybe any challenges that they have with MMM models, so that when you end up creating your measurement at the end, that it is the best that it can be. So that'd be my advice. That's
great. Jeremy, John, thanks very much for coming in. That's been superb. No, not at all. It's been great. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers, Ian.
Thank you, Jeremy and John, for joining me today. It has been fascinating to hear about the work that you've been doing and to understand just how important location data is to building accurate measurement models in order to prove the true ROI for your marketing channels. If there's anything you would like to ask us or hear more about, you can visit the JCDecaux Marketing Hub online. We hope you enjoyed listening. And wherever you get your podcasts, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.